Dear South Africans, in fact, my fellow Africans, because whether we like it or not, an African will always be an African, and we share a common history, we share a common struggle, and whether we admit it or not, we share a common purpose. That is why wherever an African finds himself, he is easily identified, and people relate to him as an African. Yes, we are Africans because we share a common purpose to rise together beyond colonialism, beyond imperialism, and one day stand strong together as a continent. So irrespective of your region, your zone, or your territory, there is a reason we are all Africans. We must begin to appreciate that. You see, anytime the internet becomes heated about South Africa, I don't see innovation and I don't see any development. Instead, what I see is xenophobia. And this is not new, ladies and gentlemen. In 2008, xenophobic attacks left over 60 people dead and a lot of them being displaced. And more than 50,000 people were being displaced. In 2015, at least 7 people were killed, with shops being looted. In 2019, about 12 people died, over 600 arrests were made, and properties were being destroyed. Ladies and gentlemen, counting on 2022 till now, groups like Operation Dudula have continued with harassment, evictions, and assaults. In total, over 80 lives have been lost across major outbreaks. A lot others from different African countries are being harassed. They are being beaten and gotten the worst from some South African citizens. So this is not an isolated issue. This is a pattern. And recently, I came across a video of a woman known as Victoria Africa, aka Queen V, confronting a Ghanaian man demanding his documents. Pause. Isn't it amazing that she has added Africa to her name, yet doesn't seem to tolerate other Africans in her country? Since when did ordinary citizens gather themselves as a group? Since when did these groups become immigration officers or immigration units? Because as far as I know, only authorized institutions have that power, not individuals, not groups, not social media activists. Now let's be honest. Even if someone is in your country illegally or involved in a crime, that is a matter for the law, not street justice, nor harassment or public humiliation. What we are seeing now is not enforcement, it is targeting. And I hope the leadership of South Africa would act accordingly, because this is not right. And this is where I come in, because Ghana is my home. Let me remind you of something that many South Africans seem to have forgotten. South Africa was not liberated by South Africans alone. Remember, after 1948, what South Africa went through was so much to the extent that countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Zambia, Tanzania, and others stood behind South Africa during the Apartheid. Let's take Ghana for instance. Under Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana became a hub for African liberation, that is in South Africa. Members who were part of ANC and were sent to exile were accepted in Ghana, and all of them were given Ghanaian passports so that their movements within African countries and other parts of the countries across other places would be easy. In 1958, the All African People's Conference was held in Accra here. South African leaders like Oliver Tambo were present from the 1960s, ladies and gentlemen. South Africans who were fleeing apartheid were given scholarships and free education by the Ghana government. Many of these South Africans studied at Legon and KNUST, which is Ghana's top universities. They were hosted, funded, and protected. And after apartheid, many of them returned to become leaders in South Africa. Nigeria has done a great good to South Africa. Nigeria contributed financially massively to the extent that there was an establishment of what is known as Mandela tax. Ladies and gentlemen, Google Mandela tax right now. The Mandela tax refers to compulsory salary deduction and voluntary donations made by Nigerian citizens to South Africa, including students and civil servants, in the 1970s and 1980s to support South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, this included even students who were schooling. They had to pick some of their pocket money out of love for Africa to support their fellow African. This fund supported the Southern Africa Relief Fund, SARF, and the African National Congress, ANC. Zambia and Tanzania provided shelter. Africa stood up for South Africa. So today, when Africans are being harassed in South Africa, what exactly changed? Today, South Africans are living across Africa. South Africans are living in various African countries. In Ghana alone, there are about 5,000 to 6,000 South Africans who live in Ghana. In Nigeria, there are about 20,000 to 30,000. In Kenya, they are around 3,000 to 5,000. Even in Mozambique and Zambia and other African countries, you can find South African citizens over there. They live freely, they work, they do business, and mind you, not all of them even have legal processes and documents to live there. And speaking of business, ladies and gentlemen, South African companies are across African continent, especially in Ghana here. In Ghana, we have the MTN. We have the ShopRite, MultiChoice, Stanbic Bank, Vodacom, Pick and Pay, and so many South African companies that is in Ghana doing well. These companies in different African countries are making billions across the African economy. So the question is simple. What do you gain as a South African by creating enmity across a continent that once stood behind you? Now let's bring it back home. Ghanaians are known across Africa and beyond to be peaceful, disciplined, and law-abiding. And let me speak to my fellow Ghanaians in any African country or any other country. Only immigration officers and authorized law enforcement have the legal right to request your passport, not a random group of people who call themselves activists or whatever they may call themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just about violence. This is about something deeper. This is a clear sign of ignorance of history on the part of South Africans. It seems they have forgotten their history, because many young people today do not know what apartheid cost. They do not know what Africa sacrificed. And when history is forgotten, arrogance replaces gratitude. But let me say this clearly. If every African country decides today to treat South Africans the same way, this would not be a conversation anymore. It will be crisis. Africa cannot rise if Africans are fighting against other Africans. We cannot preach unity and practice division, ladies and gentlemen. You see, yesterday it was Nigerians. Today it is Ghanaians. Tomorrow, nobody knows which other country it will be. Hence, let us all come together and let us be concerned about this xenophobic attitude of South Africans. Dear South Africa, Africa did not stand with you so that you could stand against us when you have been established. Africa gave you all its support. Africa supported you in times of your need. Africa needs to remember itself. South Africans need to remember this and be grateful to all African countries. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. This is your boy Sikeja Kofi. Kindly subscribe to my channel and come back. Let us have another meaningful conversation.